Welcome everyone. Welcome to the App Modernization webinar hosted by CloudGeometry. I'm Elena, Head of Communication for CloudGeometry, and I have here with me David Fishman and Nick Chase. Welcome, guys. I'm so happy we managed to get you two together today to talk about application modernization. Before we dive in, I want to say a couple of words about our guests. David Fishman is a VP of Products and Services at CloudGeometry, has been in the industry for what he says is a very long time, and his work spans cloud infrastructure, analytics, mobile, embedded, and open source. He's a startup veteran with 10 plus venture-funded companies, both successful and the other kind, and product and business leadership roles at publicly traded enterprises tech corporations. Nick Chase is CloudGeometry's AI practice lead and senior director of product management. He's an active software developer, Kubernetes expert, and experienced CTO, as well as published author with many books, as well as hundreds of articles in publications ranging from IBM to the New Stack. So welcome, guys. We're happy you're here, and let's dive into the subject.
Okay, great, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. First, Elena, thank you so much for that introduction. If you have never been to a webinar before, there's some helpful information over there on the left. Otherwise, what we're going to do here is we're essentially going to talk about why you want to think about application modernization and how that relates to the cloud, and also the three groups of use cases being business use cases, technical use cases, and organizational use cases. And hopefully we'll have time to get to some Q&A at the end. So, David, let's ask this question. Why should we think about this now? David?
So what's important about application modernization? On the one hand, it's almost silly to talk about application modernization because since the dawn of time, there are exactly 0 items of software that have already been written that never need to be changed, unless, of course, you're taking a class. Now, any useful software that does not need to be changed has to contend with the fact that time is not only the only constant, but in the 20th century, it was important. Now, we're all living in the age of the Jetsons, and so time has become even more crucial. So when we talk about migration, a lot of folks like to think, oh, it's too late to migrate. The cloud is already done. We just got to leave everything where it is and leave well enough alone. I would put this a little differently. I would say it's not that it's too late. It's just too late to say we're done because we migrated. Software is going to be changing all the time. And if you're not changing your software all the time, it's kind of like you haven't changed your socks in a while. So what's modernization for? Really, at the most basic level, it's about reducing costs and risks. Mostly, modernization is about making it easier today to add new features and efficiencies to meet tomorrow's business opportunities and business problems. But there's another important reason that becomes more and more acute as time goes on, which is that lowering the barriers to integration between systems that were generally developed separately.
And if you're not able to do that, it's not just a luxury, or a oh, we should have thought of that. It's something that if you don't do it, you are really, really hurting yourself. It's especially at the speed of which things move today. You've got to get that taken care of.
Now, if it's hard for you to explain this, we provided this handy illustration so that you can explain Venn diagrams even to people who don't understand Venn diagrams.
Apparently, 2/3 of the people, according to this Venn diagram.
There are 3 overlapping motivations, use cases for modernization. Business motivators are, let's not confuse them with business requirements or guesses about the market. Business is about fixing problems that are slowing growth. You want to modernize because there's something interfering, problems that are undermining growth or slowing it. you want to grow the top and bottom line. Now, in the technical domain, which the challenge, of course, is it's sort of like working on the airplane engines while you are flying. And then finally, the biggest challenge of modernization is organization problems. Nick, I think you want to make a comment here.
Yes, I do want to make a comment here. So, if you're not fixing business problems, what exactly are you doing? In fact, that is really when most companies start to actually do their modernization. They're like, everything's fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then we get to a point where the business is like, we have this problem and we need to fix it. And the developers and engineering are like, yeah, we can't do that with what we have.
So we'll talk about this in the context of the organizational opportunities and limitations. A lot of people don't think about the organizational problems that are behind how the people work on the software is at least as important in understanding the right application modernization use cases as the conventional thinking about, oh, is it a business tech problem or is it a technical problem? They do really overlap, and I'll refer you back to that handy Venn diagram about Venn diagrams. Let's dive into what some of the key problems are to solve in, let's be clear, no webinar today is complete without a discussion of AI. Nick, you're the AI practice lead.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, that is very true. You're not taken seriously if you're not talking about AI at some point. The fact is, though, that most businesses can't just dive right in to doing AI, because what AI forces you to do is to have not just a lot of data, but a lot of clean data. And the bad thing is that means that you've got to clean your data. And the good thing is that it forces you to clean your data. And when you're all done, you have this resource that you did not have before. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do it in this kind of crawl, walk, run sort of adoption flow. But what you'll find is that you'll have better monitoring of what you're doing. You'll have better data engineering and all of that DevOps that you've been doing. And we'll talk more about DevOps later, that you can then expand that into ML ops and eventually, and it's not on here, but AI ops. So, David, let me ask you a quick question here. Has this been true about systems integration forever, right?
Yes, it has.
Yeah. All right. So what makes it different, or, what's the opportunity that you have here with AI that you didn't have before? I mean, can't AI just make all these problems go away?
Nope, it's not magic. Feels like magic, but it's not.
No, exactly. And yes, I did set you up there, and I'm not sorry. Look, there are things that you can do with AI that you couldn't do before in terms of, making predictions and analytics and being able to generate new ideas and cleaning up the data or figuring out the difference between, different data streams and resolving it without you having to write and maintain some ETL process workflow. But no, it is not magic. And
Nick,
you do have to put the work in. Yes.
I think we've checked the AI box, but we will come back to AI later.
Okay. Yes, let's do it.
Let's continue through business drivers. Cost optimization. There's a lot of noise about, let's just move to the cloud and it'll save money. That's not really what it's all about. And I think for the most part, people understand that. One of the hidden costs that you have to address in the modernization journey, no matter where you are in your leverage of the cloud, there's all kinds of hidden tech debt, right? So you had brought some assumptions about how the application should run from your data center into the cloud, but then there's all this tech debt, like how do load balancers work? Are you using software load balancers? How are you cleaning up data storage and so forth and so on, that really change once you're moved into a more integrated cloud environment with respect to cost optimization. And these are little things like, so who's in charge of turning off these instances that we're not using this weekend because we turned them on? The drive to cost optimization is really at the core of everything you're doing with the platform. But where people often miss is to think about cost optimization not as a top line, bottom line problem, but as an engineering problem. right? You want
And modernization lets you deal more handily with that in many
right.
ways.
And the idea is not just to tell the engineer to keep doing the same thing, but do it on the cloud, but making it easier for the developers to do the development work that they care about and have to worry less about, okay, am I in charge of these VMs or not? When you decide to modernize apps that are already on the cloud, there's going to be upside in other directions, like containerization. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Nick, let's look at the next question, which is, so
M&A.
yeah, there are two companies. One has more money, one has less money, and then one says we should buy the other, and then it's not exactly what everybody expects, because the goal of M&A is to try to get two companies to integrate smoothly together. And when they arrive in the same place at the same time, they're not always in the same situation. It's kind of inevitable. It's no one's real fault. It's just that the systems are different. There's legacy code on one side and the other side. It's not like, when you acquire a startup and you're a big company that everything was perfect, because the startup world is different. And this is the kind of thing at CloudGeometry we run into a lot. We're very frequently brought in either by the companies who have acquired a startup, or because we have been working with a startup that has been acquired. So there's a lot of work to identify where the technical gaps are, even assumptions about processes. What did you mean by DevOps? Are APIs sufficiently standardized? What are the assumptions about front-end rebranding to make the acquired company look like the acquiring company?
And typically the acquired company is the one that has the technology that is wanted. So it's the acquiring company that has legacy software that's going to need to change.
I think that's true sometimes, but I think it's more appropriate to think about this about when are we doing well or poorly with the 1 + 1 = 3 equation. Data integration really requires adaptation and changes on both sides. And so things that seem perfectly fine in the startup world might not be perfectly fine in the enterprise world, but that's no one's fault. You just have to have some changes and alignment of assumptions. Let's talk about compliance. Laws are changing real fast, and if you want to get a picture of that, just look up AI in any news feed. Things were compliant yesterday are not going to be compliant today. The fact is, everyone's a global company, whether you like it or not. You may be in the US, still have to think about GDPR if you ever want to have a customer outside the 50 states.
And that's absolutely true. And there's a lot of things that we have to think about. You found some component on Docker Hub and you said, oh, I'll bind that in production. It seems to work perfectly fine until you discover that what you pulled from Docker Hub includes secrets and logs from the container as written, and you didn't know that in advance. And you got to find a way to be able to launder that out of the process of software release and development.
I would also say that modernization is not just about cleaning up the bad stuff, right? Oh my God, it's terrible. Look at the tech debt. We should have done this years ago. How could we have been so stupid to build this way? Sometimes it's like, wait, there are opportunities to do this better the next time. And for most developers I know, having been around for a while, they kind of champ at the bit to fix stuff. And if you can align the fixed stuff with compliance, and in the microservices world, that becomes more and more tenable. Good for HIPAA, right? And you say, well, we didn't account for this when we built the app, and now we're going to be entering the healthcare market. Compliance regimes will, for example, force you to look at logging, and there are side benefits in looking at logging that can have an impact on, root cause analysis and reliability and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of upside in taking a closer look at compliance.
Okay. Well, now what about UI, UX?
I used to work in mobile, and people would say, I'm an expert in the mobile, and the reason is that they all had mobile phones. And so when we think about UI, UX refresh, we all have the common experience. I mean, here in California, you look at the Department of Motor Vehicles and you say, wow, that is some really old software. But let's not stop at the DMV. Look at Southwest Airlines, right? They had a great website for consumer experience, but the UI and UX to help schedule pilots and crew was a few years behind because nobody thought it was important to look after the crew until they got fined billions of dollars, right? So the notion that we don't really need to change this behind scenes part of the business, that's not true. And so when you think about this in terms of the UI UX, right? In other words, what's the user experience and how easy it for users across the board to be productive? Modernization is not just another pretty face. Nick, tell us a little bit from
That's true. I mean, look, I mean, let's talk a bit about this from the developer perspective. I mean, first off, for those of you who don't know what UX is, that's the user experience. And the thing is, user expectations are just growing exponentially. You cannot keep up with UX, period. You need to be flexible so that you can change things, and that's where it comes in on the technical level. We need to be able to use these modern libraries and be able to turn things on and off at will, and also have all the abilities to do these integrations so that we can change the UX quickly. And that is a development issue.
When you're putting a bunch of systems together, there was a day, in the 20th century where you make something web compatible by turning a green screen into a browser thing. But there are changes in the business models that drive. So if you had small customers and now you have big customers, you have to have application admins who are on the customer side. You need to have super users. Being able to refactor the user experience and the UI to address these new kinds of customers is crucial. Now, again, we're all consumers. As I said in the beginning, as we talked about this slide, people are going to look at you and say, this works on my iPhone. Why does it look like the DMV? And the fact is that the DMV here in California, it's actually much better. They have a pretty good mobile app. So driving this and taking advantage of what users experience, all of the users, all kinds of users, is a great way to kind of unlock the potential through application modernization.
And I think modernization has kind of broken the logjam in that respect, because it has been so hard to change things for so many years, and now all of a sudden it's really easy to change everything.
Yep.
So if you modernize properly.
Yeah, then it's just a matter of prioritization. So I want to talk about one last thing in the business level, which is multi-tenancy, right? So we're all familiar of the applications where you have a profitable subscription, but a lot of enterprise applications, a lot of business applications are not built that way. So many people talk about this in terms of business transformation and digital transformation and whatnot. But my friends at AWS are very fond of saying, SaaS is not a technical problem; it's a business problem, and I kind of agree with that. I would also say that multi-tenancy can be a hard problem to solve because the kind of data isolation and the kind of variable experience, the people who are getting the application for free or the people who are using it occasionally may not need the same instances in storage and caching policies and so forth as the people who are heavy users. And so that can be a source of friction in performance or in cost or even in compliance. And that can make multi-tenancy a little bit of a hard problem to solve. We know, what's the expression? We know a few things because we've seen a few things. And we know how
exactly right.
practice.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a problem that, is, like you say, it's both a business problem and a technical problem. You need to be able to provide those well-paying customers with the technical capabilities that they need without them being drowned out by all of the people who are, on your free plan.
Right. People who have more money will pay more money, but you need to make it worth it to them. So whether you're a SaaS business where you live on subscriptions or you want to optimize how you deliver the software to the people who it's most valuable for, you need to be able to think about both of them. Salesforce is obviously a great example because they've in a sense driven this whole resolution. So think of it as a full stack problem and not just a business problem, even though it has a very clear kind of business motivation. Enough business talk. Let's talk about technology because
Okay.
really what gets me out.
Absolutely. This is what everybody thinks of when they think of application modernization. It's not necessarily the best way to look at it, but it is, as you always say, necessary but not sufficient. So let's talk about some of the technology motivators for application modernization. The airplane is flying, yes, it is, but you do have things to fix, and this is not a movie. So let's talk about what problems you're fixing and when you're attacking application modernization. There's never a bad opportunity to think about this. It's never the wrong time to talk about the program.
Sometimes you don't have any choice, right? We had one customer who had put together a pharmacy benefits application led by a very clever guy who wrote the entire application stack in Haskell, and then he left.
Yes.
Well,
Don't you just love
yeah.
it?
Talk,
Yeah,
talk about tribal knowledge
exactly.
when the tribe has disappeared.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's important that, you're prepared to take on not just these niche languages that were used, 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, but also languages that are not so niche, but they're old. I mean, a lot of these legacy applications are written they're written in Java as a single monolithic application, and maybe you don't even have the source code anymore, or it could be as simple as needing a gradual refactoring to expose these dependencies and microservices, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really, any stack that's more than 5 years old, you have to really think about whether it's quote unquote modern or not.
So before we dive into microservices, because who doesn't like talking about microservices? There's a more basic question, which is kind of tied to integration, but it's also kind of tied to user experience, which is how are you going to add new things? You often don't really need to start at a clean slate. You just got to figure out what you're going to do to refactor. And when we say refactor, we're not saying, wait a minute, rewrite everything because I hate that language. But it's possible to keep the business logic the same and just change some of the underlying implementations. It's something we actually end up doing quite a lot.
Right, exactly. And this is something that AI does help a lot with, in some cases, particularly if you have the source code, obviously. And we have the ability to kind of take this code and put it into a state where the first thing that you need to do is build out these APIs that define, okay, well, what does the software actually do? And then test and manage those APIs. And then finally you can start to, expand that and, look at cleanup and adding in these new features. It's a better way to kind of manage what you have rather than just kind of adding more spaghetti on top of the spaghetti that you've already got.
And I was going to say it's not all fresh spaghetti, but there are very few businesses that rely on just a single application, right? There are all these different parts, and one of the things that we often find ourselves invited to work on is, can you take care of application A, and we'll take care of application B, and kind of divide the labor. People who have deep familiarity with business processes that you've already automated you can move some of that to people who have less experience but have deep experience in software, and you can in fact rearrange the division of labor. We jumped ahead to the organization question. The people who may not know about the vertical specifics of, I don't know, medical record keeping, they might not need to know about a lot, but the people who do have the expertise, it frees them up from some of the crucial maintenance tasks and let them really dig deep on what they've learned about the industry as software developers at your company. for as long as your company's been around.
Because let's face it, anytime you think about outsourcing some of your development, you think to yourself, but I need somebody who understands my industry. And you do. So you've got those people. So let's free them up by not having them do this maintenance that can be done by somebody who doesn't need, 10 years of experience in pharmaceuticals.
Right. Again, it's down to the division of labor. And, I kind of hate the notion of offshoring or outsourcing. It's like, okay, we'll just set it down and fire all these people, and then we'll, get some youngsters from some country I've never been to. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a division of labor so that you can really take advantage of the pieces of the stack. And that, my friends, is the moment we've been waiting for. Who doesn't want to talk about microservices?
Everybody wants to talk about microservices.
Yeah, well, microservices is really a lot, very, very much in discussion. But the kind of the bottom line about microservices is, well, there's two. One is you do not have to re-architect everything all at once. You can carve off pieces, and we touched on that a little bit when we talked about adding features and functions. But I think equally important is that you have to align it with the business. And sometimes developers can kind of get a little carried away. So it's a microservice. Well, what does it do? Well, it looks for smart quotes and changes them into straight quotes. Well, if you're an internationalization company, that would be, kind of good to do. But for everyone else, the smart quotes, straight quotes, that's not a microservice. That's a few lines of code. A microservice just needs to be aligned with the business. I mean, this is when Adrian Cockcroft, who was at Sun and then Netflix and then at AWS, he will tell you that microservices, which he kind of made up, was you have to be able to trace why you're building the software to some business problem. Now, it's not one iteration, it's not one sprint, but no, you can work through it iteratively. And again, that's something that we do a lot.
Yeah, and definitely not a single sprint. And it is important to understand what you're trying to do, and not just why you're trying to do it, but how you're trying to do it. What is it dependent on? And also the security issues. Once you move into a microservices architecture, that is a serious challenge that needs to be taken seriously. How are you going to protect these microservices so that they can only be accessed by other services that need to be accessing them?
Yeah, that dependency exposure problem, by the way, is not trivial, because some of these dependencies you don't know until you've carved out a microservice and you say, you really need to rethink QA coverage. We have one customer who said, I do not allow developers to release microservices into production. Why? Because of all the dependencies. It's like, well, those dependencies are a source of tribal knowledge, but it also shows that they are taking seriously the sequencing of iterative move to more and more and more up-to-date microservices that align with changing business problems. Business problems are rarely black and white, right? And software needs to be black and white in order to work. Maybe not AI. I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, that's right. So, all right.
Yeah, let's dig one layer deeper, because if we're talking about microservices, let's use big words.
Exactly. Kubernetes. Exactly. So, we've got it's a nice conceptual term, but in the end, there's actual engineering work behind it, and you got to run it somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Look, in some cases, you can just stop with containerization, right? You take an application, you sort of package it, and you write a little bit of documentation and say, okay, what comes from where, and what are the latest versions of different components within your container, and that's it. Maybe that works with Kubernetes, maybe it doesn't, right? But the maintainability of containers is really sort of the what's what I'm looking for. the prime motivation. Now, if it's going to be a more interesting problem where you have to do a lot of variable workload distribution and so forth and so on, fine grain credentialing, coordinated release validation and whatnot, then Kubernetes gets interesting. But Nick, you've forgotten more about Kubernetes than most people will ever know.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, look, the real question is how cloud native does it actually need to be? And I mean, containerizing it and running it as a single pod or even multiple pods within a Kubernetes cluster may be enough for you, and that's what you need to figure out in terms of this process. So there's the challenge of being able to figure out all this stuff within the architecture, but once you've done that, you have the ability to decouple your workloads from your infrastructure. So you can say, move it to another Kubernetes provider or another location or whatever,
or another cloud.
Or another cloud, exactly. And you have all the capabilities that you get with Kubernetes, so there should not be any surprises. You also have the ability to do that kind of strict change management, assuming that you're actually able to change the application that maybe you couldn't do before, and that's something that is a huge thing that you need to take into consideration.
Look, I don't want to rain on the Kubernetes parade, but Kubernetes has some sharp edges. And we're really kind of conservative about, I don't know what the question is, but the answer is Kubernetes. Sure, we're a certified Kubernetes service provider from the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and we've certainly gained a lot of advantages in DevOps and platform efficiency from Kubernetes, but sometimes it's not the right answer.
That is absolutely true. But, and at the same time, there are ways which you can look at how you hand off from a container into a distributed Kubernetes environment, with things like, automated validation for static and dynamic code, static and dynamic code testing, or, looking at secrets management. It's not all that unusual where the secrets management for the development phase or for staging is different than in the real world. So, you've got to be a little more focused on the handoff of the various artifacts, whether they're containers or images or Terraform scripts or Helm charts. But, once you do that, you're in a position to be much more flexible. But the process of moving to Kubernetes makes you think about it. And just as the process of moving into AI makes you get clean data, just doing it is a benefit.
Well, to be clear, even with containers, right? The nurse says, "Well, I just got it from Docker Hub. It should be fine."
That is not true.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you may have seen news where somebody scanned all of the containers in Docker Hub and said that a whole bunch of them had secrets in their log files. That you just
and that includes, by the way, the official images, not just like things that people put together.
So you can get in trouble even with the best of intentions. I think if you're a software developer, that's true. Look, the bottom line is we've gotten really comfortable with this notion of DevOps and a culture of trust and all that, but we have to stop kidding ourselves that the culture of DevOps trust has made software development so much easier. It's not. It's getting harder and harder.
It is. It's getting more and more complicated. But I mean, yes, you get the benefits. You get CI CD, with Jenkins or Argo CD, and you get automated testing, with Selenium or Bamboo and all that. But you know what I mean? Old time cowboy coders are like, why am I doing all that? Well, you're doing all that because this is the real world, and you actually do need to do it. But spoiler alert for the next slide, having a culture of trust may be necessary, but again, it is not necessarily sufficient.
And so this is why here we found ourselves doing something that is now known as platform engineering. I mean, as Nick likes to say, we were doing platform engineering before it was a thing. DevOps is built around this culture of trust. Platform engineering is built around trust but verify. Not so much why is it platform, but why is it engineering? How do you know that this package that's released or that's merged is in fact ready to run in production? And if it wasn't, how do you find out what went wrong? Platform engineering kind of stabilizes some of these things. If you get to a point where you have the necessary data and the data lifecycle, then you're going to get more out of your release process. So, Nick, tell me a little bit more about how things like CI/CD and observability, how do they become platform engineering?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, everybody wants to trust what's going on, but at the same time, there's so much responsibility that you still want to be able to verify it. And here's the other thing that kind of struck me is that when you look at the components of platform engineering, things like CI/CD and observability, and so on, most people are doing most of it already. They're doing platform engineering, but they don't know that what they're doing is platform engineering. They don't know that, they're like, oh, I don't need platform engineering. And I'm like, really? You want to stop doing CI/CD? You want to stop automated testing?
Well, I'll push back on that a little bit because a lot of companies don't really have to adopt platform engineering, but they can learn from it. If in the push process they really have not thought about effective log segmentation, so that you know what led to what, or where what can be traced to what, that's where you can stop and learn from platform engineering without becoming a platform engineering shop. Let's talk a little bit about GitOps, because from the perspective of who the hell is in charge with the code that runs our infrastructure, besides saying, oh, we should do infrastructure as code, what does it really mean?
Well, yeah, so I mean that's where GitOps really kind of shines, because I mean, for those of you not familiar, basically what it means is that changes to your infrastructure are done through infrastructure as code, but only if the code passes the traditional pull request on a Git repo. So whoever wants to make the change will submit the change, and then it has to be reviewed by the administrator or by whomever takes the ultimate responsibility. And it's not until they approve that change that it actually goes through. So it's a great set of guardrails and checks and balances to prevent dogs and cats living together, total chaos.
I'm with you. What a lot of customers have come to us and said is, look, we have some clear industry understanding that needs to be built into our applications. Could someone look after DevOps for us and do some of this feedback loop and say, in other words, they may not say these words, but they're looking for platform engineering as a service, not PaaS, but rather someone to manage the platform engineering issues so that commits and releases and monitoring and all those are part of a package. And we deliver that as a package service. You don't have to think about it. We'll do it for you. Oh, Nick, look at this. The next thing to come up is
MLOps.
MLOps. I've been waiting for this.
I know, it's true. So, I mean, look, every company already has data that they have to manage, and that data that they have to manage, for machine learning, that's going to be done on the data, and every company is going to be doing it in some way, shape, or form, even if they're not doing it in-house. And right now, we all agree that almost every company is a software company in some way. It's going to be the same for AI and machine learning. And the thing is that there's going to be these models that you need to keep track of, and you need to take care of model drift, and there are going to be huge compliance issues. They're being built in the government right now, probably literally as we sit here talking. See the executive order, but once you get these solutions in place, you can have a very smooth running AI base on which you can build the rest of your software and the rest of your business.
Well, hold on a second, right? The, the data science equation, where your data scientists are doing experimentation and they've got new ideas about what data to throw into the training model, and they've got Jupyter notebooks. The notion that they'll just hand it off to those DevOps jlobs is really a misunderstanding about how data management works, right? We have actually a customer where the data scientist said, okay, look, we have these dash cams and we can turn the dash cam video into opportunities for cities to better maintain their streets. Well, they said, hey, we'll just hand this to the platform team as a black box and they'll figure it out. But it doesn't actually work that way, because in production, you'll be shocked that assumptions the developers make about what's in production and what the SRE team has to contend with, let alone root cause, they're not the same. And so
no, imagine that. No, there has to be a transparent relationship between ML ops and the data. And in some ways, AI is finally forcing a reckoning with big data, which everybody said, oh, that'd be great. We'll have much bigger data, NoSQL, blah, blah, blah. And now we realize that, we have to be pretty well specified and even shock scientific. I know, God, putting science into data science, but it's got to be done.
It's got to be done, and in the end, there's data. And I'll just make a quick backspace plug to platform engineering. Being able to have transparency about what happens in operation and making it easier for developers to consume. That's true for AI and data science as well. Let's talk about one more often neglected aspect of modernization, because making a change to an organization is not easy. You say, oh, we'll fire all these guys and go get those guys. I mean, that's the outsourcing fallacy is, these youngsters at this country I've never heard of. No, right? Thinking of your modernization problem as a division of labor within the organization is crucial. And in fact, sometimes it'll drive a rethink of the division of labor. In fact, as it turns out, with our customer conversations, this is true exactly 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, expertise gaps they're a huge problem for everybody. I mean, the reality is that the process of creating software using all of these technologies, especially now that AI is dropping into the mix, it's really hard to get all these professionals. Even with all of these layoffs, because most of those people went off and started their own companies. But if you have more modern applications, it is in some ways easier to find the appropriate skill set because you can do that division of labor.
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, right? So 1,400 guys who just got laid off on Cisco may or may not be ready to join your company, and they may not have the shared assumptions that you need in order to facilitate a division of labor. It's important to think about the expertise problem, not just in terms of cost cutting or defensive competitive advantage or whatnot. The structure of the team is really the key to success. And we think of software as a team sport. So when you're looking for ways to relieve some of this expertise gaps, you may even have the experts, they're just doing too many things. We're pretty good at doing this headcount arithmetic piece of it. By the way, again, one of my favorite expressions, necessary but not sufficient. You may just say, hey, we need some of those guys. And it turns out that we can field them as a team to take your new external resources, or take your internal resources, I should say, and put them on a problem that they uniquely understand. And some of the division of labor, particularly with a more modern stack, where let's ring the bell on microservices and let's ring the bell on platform engineering, those separations can make you more productive. And by the way, if you are experiencing cost pressures, the smart thing to do with cost pressure is not just to say, well, let's spread the same amount of work on a smaller number of people. You can actually divide the work with people who may have less industry expertise, but can do some of the softer heavy lifting that you don't. And I will change this correct so you see the correct slide when I edit. And now we'll go to bang, right in, adapting to clouds. All right, back live. I'm a little tired of people saying, "Oh, we'll just adopt cloud." And adapting to cloud is a pretty profound change. One customer we had was a major financial institution. They introduced open source into the infrastructure, and they retrained all the operations staff. And then they said to them, "Look, you'll learn how to use open source and cloud. And when we're done with this transformation, some of you will be made redundant." That's the bad news. The good news is the stuff that we're training you how to do are going to make you very, very employable. And that gamble turned out to pay off. Now, not everybody's prepared to do this, but doing this division of labor of where you are in your tech stack, that's something we'll dig into with you, not for you, and not by making the problem go away, so much as understanding how we can better align the tech stack with the problems that the business will succeed when it solves. What we bring to the table is a bunch of experience, by the way, not all of it fun, as well as some certifications, and help you kind of manage your application portfolio in a way that lets you do what you do best, and we'll work hand in glove with your team so that together the best possible outcome for the business that is paying for all this nice software development can continue to pay off. I think legacy operations is next. Nick, is this number 18 or 19? I think this is number 18. Oh,
legacy app development is next.
Yep. All right. So look, some of these applications can't be rewritten. They just can't, right? It's too expensive. You lose some attrition, or maybe they're just people are tired of this, right? They want to go work on something else, but you don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose that expertise, right? And so you can look at the value of some integration and say, all right, what is the value of this integration to the business? Is this the best place to spend our unusual resources? Now, sometimes there's a blend. One of my favorite examples is a company that does PostgreSQL that runs on NVIDIA. So you use some of the same familiar database development paradigms, but then it runs on GPUs. And then suddenly you have you have a lot of new opportunities. Maybe you want to not rely 100% on AWS, right? Look, we have a skills base that can contend with multiple cloud scenarios, multiple application scenarios, because we have done so many of these with fintech, and for the energy sector, and from ad tech, and for healthcare across the board. We can cross-pollinate some of that to help you really balance your workforce without having to really cut deep and only stay in maintenance mode. All right, so last question. Let's move this around a little bit. It's kind of here. We'll hide our challenges. Sometimes when you have to get started, this is a good place for us to end. You bring in some new tech leadership, and you say, "All right, you're the new director of software engineering. Would you please take these cats and herd them?" In some ways, that's the
Herd as an HERD, not as an HURT.
But a lot of the things that are in the list are the very things we've been talking about, right? They happen again and again and again in the modernization problem. You just have to decide sort of where do you want to focus on in terms of what's the pain in the business. And skills gaps and best practice gaps are a huge deal. And maybe things just haven't been right and you need to shift. Oh, and then there's some interesting assumptions about who gets to control what from a securities and permissions perspective of, oh, I have to have access to prod. Well, maybe no, you don't. Right.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that can be a point of friction. I have fired people who said that because they were sure that there was only one way to do it, and there isn't. But this is not just a kind of a downside. Don't do the right, get rid of all the people you don't like, but rather how do we get the right people to solve the right problems? Nick, you wanted to make
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, look, basically what you want is to have everything moving properly. You want an integrated team, you want candidates that you can use, you want all this to be you need this situation where, everything runs smoothly and there's also some real tactical pieces that are sort of we mentioned earlier in DevOps and operational agility, or some of the technical factors. Sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes who's going to translate the logs into something that allows for better traceability. And it's, well, sometimes the people who wrote this stuff have all this in their heads, but they don't have the time to explain it to anyone, or they don't have the ability to explain it to anyone because they're not good communicators. We have an acquisition integration that we did where the CTO had all this stuff in his head, but they also had all the business logic in their head. So he said, okay, well, that's okay. We know what to do here. We'll help you refactor your logging and build the automation based on the logging so that the monitoring delivers more consistent uptime, in spite of these changes. But sometimes you just have to deal with that kind of thing.
By the way, the CTO loved that because that way he got weekends off, right? Where he was not, the first, second, and third tier of escalations. And GitOps naturally leads to that kind of, separation of concerns, right? Whether it's, the application code in its own stream or upstream, different kind of build, it can be a win-win. One last comment here is something that I've seen again and again. Your tech team can be stretched super thin, and suddenly they're chasing customer one-offs. One of the things that we have done a number of places is what I call customer success engineering, which is, with customer success has become a well understood term. Closing the gap between what the customer wants and what you might want to commit upstream into the build. It may not be something that's best done by support people who are not formally trained as software developers, because they're there to help the customer succeed. But you have an opportunity to make the engineering team succeed by looking at customer success engineering as an internal function rather than just, keep the customers happy and don't do anything that they ask you. I think we have in about 39 minutes covered about 19 different topics. So I think, Elena, it's time for a word from our sponsor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, guys. We just wanted to say that CloudGeometry delivers expert technical services, helping our clients unlock the full potential of cloud-native open source tooling and commercial platform technologies. As AWS Advanced Consulting Partners, our certified solution architects and DevOps engineers help address the range of challenges facing enterprise innovators and venture-funded startups. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation has accredited us as a Kubernetes certified service provider.
Now you know why within CloudGeometry we refer to Elena as the voice of God. I think that is all we have. Nick, do we have time for a question or two?
We have two questions that were voted by our guests.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to go through them really quickly. Okay, Elena.
Yes. I selected two, one for David and one for Nick for equality. So, David, what should we look for in a platform engineering partner?
I think this is a really good question because I'm not sure you need a platform engineering partner, but you do need a partner who understands the opportunities in platform engineering. And what it's down to is an understanding of the end-to-end progression from how does the code get written to what happens when it gets to production, and when what happens when it gets to production is not exactly what you expected, can you feed it back? So the way we think about this is, culturally, DevOps, engineering-wise, as platform engineering, is to look at those pieces and start with a reference implementation and said, okay, here's what we have done again and again. Our reference implementation is called CJDevX. Look for it in a future webinar. And then we'll help you find what the soft spots are. You may not need to make a change in your build system, but you might need to look at how you update packages. And so because we've done the different components of platform engineering in so many different contexts, we can really kind of laser in on some help and then work backwards from there to say, what if you want to extend a capability to do this kind of data integration that you've not done before with some feeds that are arriving in XML are a little hard to digest. So what you should look for in a partner is not so much, hey, can I buy some platform engineering, but can you take a close look at the tools that we have in our process and help us identify the disconnects? And how do we know that? Well, we know a few things because we've seen a few things, and they were not all pretty.
That's true. If they were pretty, they wouldn't need us. Okay, what's my question, Elena?
Nick, your question is, because you talked earlier about providing different experiences for different size customers, how can we do that from a technical perspective?
Yeah, so really that is a matter of architecture. So when you're building your application, your workloads actually can be treated much like your infrastructure and vice versa. And it's in the Kubernetes sense, this is where you really have the advantage of having a modern application because you have the ability to do things like assigning particular pods to a particular customer or vice versa. And we're typically in a cloud situation, one of the definitions of cloud is, I don't care where my application is running. I just know that it's out there in the cloud. This is a situation where that might not be the case, where you may want specific types of pods or deployments or operators or et cetera to be to have affinity with particular types of machines. Maybe they run GPUs, or maybe they are just larger machines or whatever. So this is something that you think about from an architectural standpoint when you're putting the application together, essentially.
And if I can just jump in, Nick, you may already have the application, and now you have to figure out how to differentiate some of these resources. And AWS has really, I think, a first-class write-up of this pattern called the well-architected SaaS lens. And one of the ideas they have is something called tenant identity. So think of it like they use tokens. You can think of a session token, right? You could also have a single identifier for a single user or a single tenant that's passed through to the database. It could be a single database. It could be each customer gets his or her own database. It may be a mix where some data is for some services and stored in one database or another. But it's not trivial, but it is possible to add that.
Exactly.
And it's something we've done a bunch of times, and we'd be happy to see if it makes sense or where it makes sense for you, whether it's at the identity side with identity tokens and single sign-on integration, or all the way at the other end to say, we really need to separate the database because of jurisdiction things.
Awesome. Okay.
We could go on, and I think we have. So,
but I think we're over time.
I think we are. Nick, why don't you tell everybody goodbye and thank Elena for hosting our webinar.
I will thank Elena very much. Thank you, Elena, for joining us. I know it's very late for you. And also thank you, David, for joining us. And especially thank all of you out there who have spent your time with us. We know you have lots of choices for how you're going to spend your time, and we appreciate you spending it with us. Please don't hesitate to contact us. We love to hear from you, particularly if you have some ideas on some topics that you'd like us to talk about. All right. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, everyone.